This is the Cryospring Cold Plunge, the installation of a cooler with the form factor of a cold plunge with a half horsepower chiller, upgraded filter, and a world-class pump. Is it worth the price tag? Let's find out. So first off, what I love most about this cold plunge is the aesthetics. To me, white is the absolute best color for a cold plunge, and that's for two reasons. One, because the sun reflects off of the color white. And trust me, I know that black cold plunges are very popular. They look cool, they look very sleek in any marketing materials and ads, but if you were to leave a black cold plunge out in the sun, it's going to get really, really hot. So if you go to touch it, it's gonna be hot, which is obviously going to be a problem for keeping the water temperature in the cold plunge cold. And the number two reason why I love white cold plunges is that I just love to be able to see the quality of the water. Like, just look at how beautiful that water behind me looks. It's just natural, it's blue. I just love seeing the blue water when I get into it. And if the water were to get murky or cloudy, you could see that visibly and then take the necessary steps to fix it. The other thing I love about this cold plunge is the insulation. This thing has 4 inches of insulation, which means that it's going to hold temperature really, really well. And fun fact, these Cryospring cold plunges are actually manufactured in the same factory where Yetis used to be made. So just very high quality, very thick, very insulated. And if you check out their website, they actually have a 3D rendered cross section of this tub, so you can just get a better idea of what you're working with. And yeah, I mean, the insulation is just incredibly impressive. What's also impressive is the lid, which is also just a beast in itself. And the lid has some great features as well. For one, it stays attached. And I always say with cold plunging, it's hard enough as it is, so it's just nice to not have to worry about, removing a lid, putting it down somewhere, and then putting it back on when you're done. It's just annoying. So with this, it just pops right open and you're good to go. It also has this mechanism to actually keep it open. So hypothetically, if you're using it outside and it's a windy day, this thing won't accidentally close on you and hit you in the head, which of course could be really, really dangerous. It also has a locking mechanism, which is great for keeping out kids or pesky neighbors. And also the top of the lid is slightly sloped, so rainwater won't sit on it if you were to keep this thing outside. The size. As far as the size, this thing, it's just an absolute tank. It's huge. I am 6'1", 200 pounds, and I easily fit in this thing. I can even kind of do a vertical plunge if I wanted to. That's how spacious it is. The size, it's just incredible. It's just so easy to get your shoulders down and not have to think twice. One thing I will say is that it is a bit high off the ground. As we can see, I can get in without assistance, but it is high, so I would recommend pairing this with a step. With that being said, the owner of the company has told me that a bunch of 5-foot women were getting in and out of this with no issue, so take that as you may. But for me, I would definitely recommend getting a step. The chiller. So this is using a half horsepower Active Aqua. In my opinion, the Active Aqua is the most robust and reliable chiller in the cold plunge market. I've done many videos on it, so just know that this is a great chiller. It'll last a long time. It's able to go outside. It gets down to 39 degrees, which in my opinion is plenty cold for 99% of people out there. I typically keep mine set at 45 degrees, and I think that's just perfect. And just to answer one question you might be having, what does half horsepower mean? And that is, it's the speed at which the water will cool down. So half horsepower will cool down the water at a quicker speed than the quarter horsepower chiller. And then once the water reaches its desired temperature, which like I said, these chillers get down to 39 degrees, the chiller will then kick on from time to time to hold temperature. I've actually been tracking my electrical use with these, and we can see from this chart that it basically just, it kicks on and off throughout the day to maintain the temperature. And ultimately, this thing is really only costing me about $25 a month to keep running 24/7, 365, which in my opinion is a great price, less than $1 a day. The other thing about the chiller, which is what drew me to this company in the first place, is that it has this housing. And the housing is essentially two parts. The bottom is a drip tray and the top is a cover. I love the cover, I love the look of it. As we can see, it just sits right above on top of the drip tray, so it's easy to remove and do any maintenance or change the temperature of the chiller or change the filter. One thing I have found though is that because the hoses don't have insulation, there does tend to be quite a bit of condensation that gets caught in the drip tray. And on that same note, one piece of criticism that I do have for this tub, especially at the price point that it's being sold at, is that I really do wish that the hoses were insulated. You know, I believe that you can purchase insulation as an add-on, but you know, like I said, for this price point, I would love to see insulated hosing. The setup. The setup is not quite as simple as other cold plunges out there, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. You know, as I always say with cold plunges, it's really not just a set it and forget it like the marketing might have you believe. You know, you're dealing with flowing, moving water, so it is important to have an understanding as to how the whole thing works. For this setup, you will need to apply some plumber's tape, and just for a quick reminder, you wrap the plumber's tape in the opposite way that you twist in. So this drain outlet was actually the first thing that I did in the setup. As we can see, this is a beautiful metallic ball valve. It's a very, very sturdy piece of equipment, and I just love how easy it is to let the water out. And if you were so inclined, you could actually attach a hose to it to get your water out even further. And you know, it's great for just general water maintenance, as you could, for example, let like 25% of your water out and then replace that with 25% new water, so that you can just kind of like refresh some water every once in a while and you don't have to empty out the whole thing. The next step is to connect the pump and filter. I do want to mention that this is a Danner pump, which the Danner pump is an absolute tank of a pump. Many people believe that this is the best pump on the market. It's also just solid metal and it weighs about 10 pounds, so it's just a beastly piece of equipment. The other thing you'll notice is that it is an oversized filter, and this is great since it's like 3 times the size of a normal filter, so you won't have to replace it as often. So, you know, most filters you see out there, they'll have to get replaced every 2 to 3 weeks, but since this is 3 times the size, you could get away with only needing to replace it every 6 to 8 weeks, which of course is great. Finally, you should notice one of the best things about this plunge is just how short of a distance that the water is moving throughout the system. As you can see me holding all the hoses right here, that's it. That's the length of all the hoses. So super efficient, super quick. Basically the way it works is that the water first hits the hair catcher, which is inside of the tub, which just filters out any large particles. It then hits the pump, which shoots it to the filter, which is going to filter out the water. From the filter, it shoots it into the chiller, which obviously cools down the water, and then from there right back into the tub. As we can see, just such a short distance that the water has to travel here. Just so efficient. I think of all the cold plunges that I've reviewed, this is like the shortest distance that I've ever seen water have to move. So super, super good feature right there. These hoses, as we can see, are also quick release, making them very, very easy to attach. And I will say I have never used these type of hoses before. And when I was setting this thing up, I was almost certain that there would be a leak because of just how easy they were to attach. But not a single leak. So I don't really understand this voodoo magic of how these hoses work, but they do. One more thing to note about the hoses and the general plumbing layout here is that the water does have a couple of hard 90-degree turns where it actually gets throttled at a little less than 1/2 inch diameter, which is going to slow the flow rate down a little bit. Once again, not that big of a deal, but something to note as to why you may see some tubs using the exact same pump, but just having a stronger flow rate. Another thing to note is that as far as the setup goes, is that this tub does not have handles, which once again isn't that big of a deal, as it's not like you're going to be moving this thing much, but it was very, very difficult for me to get this thing into place, and I couldn't actually do it by myself because I couldn't get a good grip on it. Lastly, they do give you an electrical box to store all of your electrical stuff in. The pump and the chiller both need electricity. They give you a timer, so you can, for example, just keep the chiller on during parts of the day if you were so inclined. I personally would recommend just keeping this thing on 24/7, 365, as constantly flowing water is much less likely to create bacteria, and also constantly flowing water is less likely to freeze in the wintertime. So, I believe that as long as you are keeping this thing on running 24/7, 365, which this Plunge is fully capable of, you are able to have this thing outside in freezing cold winter and all through the summer with no issues. Overall thoughts. So the question you've been waiting for, is this cold plunge worth it? Well, I guess that really depends on your budget. As of right now, this cold plunge is going for $5,500, which I will say is a steep price. However, I do think that you are getting a really nice piece of equipment. I love the color. It's an absolute beast of a cold plunge. Are there similar cold plunges out there with similar features for less money? Yes. But does this cold plunge also have features that no other cheaper cold plunge really has, such as 4-inch thick insulation, a beast of a lid, an oversized filter, a 1/2 horsepower chiller? Also yes. So ultimately, should you buy it? That depends. Do you like the color? Do you like the look, the size? I will say, I definitely don't think that you will go wrong. You will not regret buying this cold plunge, as I am confident that it will last you a really, really long time. It's also fully American made, so if anything were to go wrong, every single piece is easily replaceable. And lastly, if you've been watching this video and are wondering what that little blue tube is at the end there, well, that is ozone. And I'll be making a separate video on that, but I love ozone for keeping my cold plunge water crystal clean. And I specifically love that this tub uses a JED 303 ozone machine, which also is just an absolute tank of an ozone. And what's great about this tub is that the ozone is separate from the general plumbing, which means that it makes it very, very easy to install and also monitor. And of course, that is how you get this beautiful looking blue water. So if you're interested on a separate video on this ozone, I will put the link in the description. Boom. If you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing and check out our website at plungereviews.com. We also post the funniest cold plunge memes on the internet at cold plunge memes on Instagram.